right. This is our presentation on piano improv. So the techniques discussed in this chapter included 1 to 4 note improv. So improv with just 1 to 4 notes. The use of black keys was recommended for speed and as well as the different music elements. 2-note improv is 2 notes played together or separately to create different harmonies and dissonance. And Wigram presents a variety of exercises in this chapter to help with creative improv, and these can be adapted for other instruments or for people that have more or less experience on piano. Here's an example of 1-note improv. It's a lot more complex than it sounds, so I thought this was kind of a fun example to look at. So 1 and 2-note improv. For 1-note improv, you're gonna pick 1 note, play gently without a pulse, play anywhere on the piano and add stylistic elements, match the tempos in your right and left hand, and play for a 2-minute duration. The 2-note, you can either do a thick texture when the notes are placed all over the piano, or also a thin texture if there's a lot of open spaces between notes. 3-note improv is where you start to get the really complex harmony, ideas of melody start emerging. You can use first and second inversion chords, and Wigram suggested to not play all 3 notes at the same time, so using different combinations. And if you play 2 out of the 3 notes together, you establish some sort of key. For 4-note improv, it builds a greater harmonic potential, and he used what are called 4-note clusters to create some dissonant and atonal harmonies. So something that's important to incorporate are sections with only 2 to 3 notes, some sections with 4 notes altogether, play with and without pulse. So there's a lot of different ideas in this chapter for how to incorporate 4 notes. Another important part of this chapter was pulse and tempo. So those are important aspects of improv. And Wigram mentions that pulse-bound improv can actually obstruct the creative process, but the vague pulse can also create a lack of stability. So it's important to try to go in and out of pulse with different speeds to kind of get a balance.
So next we have chordal improvisation. To practice, choose a key and stick to the 3 notes in the tonic triad chord. Practice creating both rhythmic pulse music and non-pulse music. And be sure to explore full range of the piano and improv in as many different ways as you can. You can also use different chordal positions like the root, first inversion, and second inversion of the tonic triad. The shimmer effect is one of the special effects that you can use when doing a chordal improv. This is a special effect by playing a third and a fourth in a soft and very fast rocking motion in the right and left hand on the piano. The next effect is the arpeggio or broken chord effect. To practice this, first decide on a chord that you want to improvise on. Start to play broken chords and arpeggios on these chords, alternating between pulse and non-pulse music. Moving on from chordal improv, we have melody improvisation. Here are some information on melody before we move on to the exercises. Good melodies contain some direction to the music, repeated phrases, and even some sense of harmony. In music therapy, the way a client plays a melody might represent aspects of their own pathological problem. So the following are 2 exercises to practice melody improv that's mentioned in the textbook. Exercise 1 is melody improv within the tonal frame. Important points to remember when practicing is to make sure that there's some sense of harmonic direction in your melody and to develop a predictable direction in the melody. Exercise 2 is the left hand atonal melody improv. Once you have your atonal melody on your left hand, try and give it a sense of structure and coherence by repeating phrases, figures, and patterns. This is really important because without a sense of structure, atonal melody can sound very chaotic and directionless. You can also add variation to the exercise by changing the way you play. Next, we have melody dialogues. This can be very useful in therapy interactions because melody dialogues can represent conversational experiences in music between the client and the music therapist. To practice, start with the melody on one hand while the other hand holds the note. Once you have the melodic idea, let the other hand take over the melody while the first hand holds the note. As a starting point, you should remember that the melody you use should be predictable, tonal, with a stable rhythm and pulse, with small interval movement, and no major dynamic variation. Next, we have melody doubling. This is playing the same melody phrases in both hands simultaneously, but for or 5 octaves apart on the piano. If you're not very familiar with this idea, you can start with slow chromatic music with occasional short pauses to achieve accuracy. Then we have chord and melody improvisation. This practice starts with a free recitative style of improvising, leading to a meter and stable pulse eventually. When you first go into this stable pulse, starting with a slower tempo and playing softly is always a good idea because it allows thinking and modifying as your improvisation continues.
Okay, so next we'll move on to dissonant improvisation. In the book, dissonance is defined as a discordant combination of sounds, including intervals such as seconds, sevenths, diminished and augmented intervals. This is different from atonal music, as atonal music does not have a key, but dissonant music has a key that it's grounded in. It's important to music therapy because it's a great way to convey a sense of empathy to the client while also reflecting the client's feelings. And it's also very good for children, as children often become amused by music that sounds kind of jarring or maybe might sound a little silly to them. And in this example, the left hand is grounded in C with an augmented fourth, while the right hand can improvise in a different key, such as E or D. And one key upon another creates the sense of dissonance, but still remains within a harmonic frame. So the next one, atonal melodic dialogue. And this is music that does not have a key and is not grounded harmonically. However, it is important to still convey a sense of stability. And the book recommends doing this through repeated ideas, motifs, phrases, and rhythmic patterns. One thing to be careful of is that atonal music can often sound jarring and frightening to people, but it's beneficial because it offers the client a place to explore without having the pressure of having a musical background. So, tonal technique, the first one is 6 and thirds. For example, a way to do this would be to play C, F, G repeatedly, creating an ostinato in the left hand and playing it in slow octaves, while the right hand plays only 6 on the white notes using stepwise motion. Once you're comfortable with this, you can then use thirds in the right hand, and with the left hand, you can improvise farther than just playing the tonic, dominant, and subdominant. So for tonic triads, first and second inversion, it would be the same pattern with the left hand, C, F, G, but instead of playing the 6, you would also play the third. Once you're comfortable with this, you could move then into second position inversion using stepwise movement. And to accentuate the melody, you could put pressure on your little finger to bring the melody forward. Okay, and then the next one is playing in and out of meter. Wigram describes meter as the anchor for improvisation. However, Wigram also defines it as a musical prison. So common meters are defined as 4/4, 3/4, and 2/4, while compound meters include 6/8, 9/8, and 6/4. And compound meters are recommended because they can provide the possibility for very strong beats. It's also important to remember that music can still be flexibly rhythmic because you can use rubatos, accelerandos, and retardandos. So next we go into accompanying techniques for improvisation. The example that's used in the book is 2-chord harmony while changing texture, rhythmic pattern, meter, and style. And in the book, the left hand grounds with the tonic, dominant, and octaves, while the right hand varies in style. The right hand begins by playing chords and crotchets and then changes to a Latin American rhythm. After this, the right hand then begins playing arpeggios and then finally changes to offbeat quartz and then changes the meter. So the summary for this chapter is the goal of improvisation is to be creative and flexible. And one of the problems that people normally experience and the most common problem is that people get stuck in the same pattern and forget about different musical variables that can be used.
Thank you for watching our presentation.